Hello everyone, you're watching UZ Report World News Broadcasting with me, Davron Jumaev. Uzbek President Shavkat Mirziyoyev, during his trip to Bukhara on January 22, criticized the state of affairs in the region. He also unveiled plans that are expected to help restore the region. To the question, is the current development of Bukhara satisfactory? My answer is no. The region is 10 years behind other regions. Corruption and bribery have not been eradicated. The share of agriculture in the gross regional product is 50%. The region has great potential in the fields of industry, services and entrepreneurship. The worldview of district mayors and sector leaders must change, Mirziyoyev stressed. He promised to introduce a new system for studying problems and opportunities, ensuring employment and sources of income of the population. From now on, our society will follow a new course where the Mahalla neighborhoods will become a great force. If the chairman of the Mahalla is an educated and selfless person, then the mood of the people and the economy will be different, he added. To eliminate unemployment, some $37 million of soft loans will be allocated for the project of family and youth entrepreneurship. Over 700 investment projects worth some $1.8 billion will be implemented in the region by 2023. Uzbekistan's foreign trade turnover dipped by $5.4 billion to $36.3 billion in January-December 2020, according to the data provided by the State Statistics Committee. Exports made up $15.1 billion, with imports amounting to $21.1 billion. A foreign trade surplus was observed with four countries: Afghanistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Iran. Today, Uzbekistan carries out trade relations with almost 170 countries of the world. The largest volume of foreign trade turnover was recorded with the PRC, the Russian Federation, Kazakhstan, the Republic of Korea, Turkey, Kyrgyzstan, and Germany. The foreign trade turnover with the CIS countries amounted to $11.8 billion. Exports comprised $4.1 billion. Imports made up $7.7 billion. Turkish power company Aksa Energy is expanding the scope of its natural gas combined cycle power investments by building two more plants in Uzbekistan. The company said it plans to start operations in the fourth quarter of this year.
In a filing with Borsa Istanbul, Aksa recapped on how it previously signed an agreement with Uzbek authorities for the construction of a 240-megawatt CCGT power plant in the nation's capital, Tashkent, and the sale of the energy generated at the plant based on a guaranteed capacity payment for a duration of 25 years. On January the 20th, this agreement was amended with 230-megawatt capacity expansion, and additionally, a deal was sealed regarding the construction of a 270-megawatt CCGT in Bukhara. The additional agreement states that the sale of the energy generated at the Bukhara power plant will be based on a guaranteed capacity payment for a duration of 25 years, Aksa also noted.
Uzbekistan imported 2.2 times more vehicles in 2020 than it exported, according to the State Statistics Committee. $475.1 million worth of cars were imported to the country during the reporting period. Exports amounted to $208.7 million. In the meantime, exports grew by 30%, with import growing declining to 7%. Kazakhstan still remains the main market for domestic cars. More than 10,000 cars are exported to the neighboring country. The top three also include Azerbaijan and Ukraine. The Uzbek government plans to sell some of its property in the field of culture and art into private hands. The list proposed for sale under PPP includes 172 objects. Immovable objects of cinemas, cultural centers, parks of culture and recreation, theaters, children's schools of music and art can be privatized only upon receiving permission from the Ministry of Culture and the national agency Uzbek Kino. Tashkent State University of Oriental Studies hosted an online international conference on prospects of relations between the Central Asian republics and Afghanistan, with experts from 18 foreign countries. The conference discussed the current state of the process of involving Afghanistan in socio-economic projects in Central Asia. The president has stated several times that Afghanistan is an integral part of the Central Asian region. Establishing peace in this country is important not only for Uzbekistan, but also for the entire region. Tashkent occupies a worthy place not only in the economic recovery, but also in the creation of peace in the neighboring country. A special public foundation dedicated to Avicenna, named the Ibn Sina in Uzbekistan, has been greatly contributing to the acceleration of reforms in healthcare. The foundation on Friday provided a report on the results of its activities for 2016 to 2020.
The main objectives of the foundation are to promote healthcare, develop traditional medicine, organize in-depth research on the creative heritage of Ibn Sina, promote a healthy lifestyle, establish contacts with foreign scientists, and cooperate with UNESCO. The foundation has achieved notable results over the past 5 years. In 2016, the 11th Global Summit of the Bioethical National Committees was held on the theme Global Health, Global Ethics, Global Justice. In 2018, the first Uzbek-German Medical Forum was held on the topic Integration of German Medicine in Uzbekistan, Present and Future. Besides, Ibn Sina Foundation, together with the Republican Educational and Scientific Center of Dietetics, held a national scientific and practical seminar on the topic Current Problems of Healthy and Dietary Nutrition. And on August 16, 2020, the world community celebrated 1040th anniversary of the birth of Abi Ali ibn Sina. The foundation has big plans for 2021 as well.
The Kickboxing Association of Uzbekistan has set specific tasks for 2021. At a press conference held at the Agency of Mass Communications, the association's management also discussed the results for the past year. Kickboxing as a sport appeared in 1976. Currently, the International Kickboxing Federation in the direction of WACO includes 143 countries. The Kickboxing Federation of Uzbekistan has also been a member of this organization since 1998. There are 7 directions in kickboxing, including light ones. This sport is not only combat and professional, but also Olympic. The Kickboxing Association of Uzbekistan has its branches in all regions of the republic. Head coaches conduct systematic training sessions with athletes. We have very strong athletes, Asian and world champions. And young athletes are included in the national team. We have many plans for the current year, and we hope to implement them all. COVAX, the global initiative led by the World Health Organization to ensure rapid and equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines for all countries, said on Friday that it will purchase up to 40 million doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine and are earmarked for delivery vaccines to poor and lower-middle countries in January this year. Roll out the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, which has already received WHO emergency use listing, will commence with a successful negotiation and execution of supply agreements, according to a COVAX announcement.
Today, I'm glad to announce that COVAX has signed an agreement with Pfizer-BioNTech for up to 40 million doses of its vaccine. Additionally, pending WHO emergency use listing, we expect almost 150 million doses of the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine to be available for distribution by COVAX in the first quarter of this year. Together, these announcements mean COVAX could begin delivering doses in February, provided we can finalize a supply agreement for the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine and emergency use listing for the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine. COVAX is on track to deliver 2 billion doses by the end of this year.
But families literally can't wait another day.
U.S. President Joe Biden on Friday signed executive orders to fight the economic fallout of the pandemic.
The first step of our American Rescue Plan is a plan to tackle the pandemic and get direct financial relief to Americans who need it the most.
The orders would speed the delivery of pandemic stimulus checks to needy families and increase food aid for children who normally rely on school meals. Biden is using the 2 executive orders to try to ease people's burdens while Congress negotiates the fate of his proposed $1.9 trillion stimulus package. At a press briefing Friday, White House National Economic Council Director Brian Deese told reporters that the American people can't afford to wait.
If we don't act now, we will be in a much worse place, and we will find ourselves needing to do much more to dig out of a much deeper hole. When you're at a moment that is as precarious as the one we find ourselves in, the risk of doing too little, the risk of undershooting, far outweighs the risk of doing too much.
About 16 million people are now receiving some type of unemployment benefit, and an estimated 29 million do not have enough to eat. Women, minorities, and low-income service workers have been disproportionately hurt, with Black and Hispanic workers facing higher jobless rates than white workers.
Yesterday, we learned that 900,000 more Americans file for unemployment. 900,000.
Deese said Biden's actions were not a substitute for legislative relief, and that he is speaking with lawmakers Sunday to push for more relief. Republican lawmakers have questioned the price tags on pandemic aid and Biden's separate $2 trillion investment proposal for infrastructure, green energy projects, education, and research. Biden's second order will restore collective bargaining power and worker protections by revoking 3 related orders issued by Trump during his term, which ended on Wednesday. It also promotes a $15 an hour minimum wage. The federal minimum wage has been at $7.25 an hour since 2009.
The White House on Friday said President Joe Biden has directed his administration to conduct a full assessment of the risk of domestic terrorism in the wake of the attack on the U.S. Capitol by supporters of former President Donald Trump. White House spokeswoman Jen Psaki.
The January 6th assault on the Capitol and the tragic deaths and destruction that occurred underscored what we have long known. The rise of domestic violent extremism is a serious and growing national security threat. The Biden administration will confront this threat with the necessary resources and resolve. We are committed to developing policies and strategies based on facts, on objective and rigorous analysis, and on our respect for constitutionally protected free speech and political activities.
The assessment will be carried out by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence in coordination with the FBI and Department of Homeland Security. Psaki said that in addition to the threat assessment, the White House would build out capability within its National Security Council to counter domestic violent extremism, including a policy review on how the federal government can share information about the threat better. The news comes after the U.S. Senate on Wednesday confirmed Avril Haines as the Director of National Intelligence, the nation's top intelligence job.
Economic activity in the Eurozone shrank significantly in January. Lockdown restrictions to contain the pandemic hit the bloc's dominant service industry particularly hard. Hospitality venues have been forced to close across much of the continent, prompting a sharp contraction in IHS Markit's PMI survey on Friday. Overall, the survey, seen as a good guide to economic health, fell further below the 50 mark, separating growth from contraction, hitting 47.5 in January. That was down from December's 49.1. Chris Williamson, chief business economist at IHS Markit, said a double-dip recession for the Eurozone economy is looking increasingly inevitable. A PMI covering the service industry dropped to 45 from 46.4. But the survey revealed manufacturing remained strong as factories largely remained open. The manufacturing PMI held well above break-even at 54.7, albeit slightly weaker than December's figure. A Reuters poll this week showed the bloc's economy is expected to grow 0.6% this quarter and will return to its pre-crisis level within 2 years, on hopes the rollout of vaccines will allow a return to some form of normality.
Lebanon's worst economic crisis ever has thrown many students' futures into doubt. After a collapse in the Lebanese pound almost tripled their tuition fees. Undergraduates took to the streets in December, and some are threatening a tuition strike after 2 top private universities, the American University of Beirut and the Lebanese American University, adopted a new exchange rate to the US dollar. That left students who pay in the devastated local currency struggling. Mohammed Asahali was close to graduating in computer science when he received the blow. But the universities say they had no choice. The economic crisis and a strict coronavirus lockdown have forced them to increase the exchange rate to the bank's stipulated rate, while leaving their tuition fees in dollars unchanged. They both also increased financial aid to students by significant amounts. This is Lebanese American University President Michel Mawad.
We are suffering from this situation, as an institution just as much as the students or the parents are suffering. This actually has been imposed on us, this financial situation. We are trying to deal with it as best we can.
Lebanon has traditionally prided itself on its education system, which was set up in the 19th century by American and French missionaries. It produces a steady stream of graduates who land top jobs in the Middle East and beyond. But the crisis means those without dollars can no longer afford to study, whether abroad or at home.
Google threatened to block its search engine in Australia on Friday if the government there proceeds with a new code forcing it and Facebook to pay news companies for the right to use their content. Australia looks set to pass laws that would make tech giants negotiate payments with local publishers and broadcasters for what's included in search results or news feeds. And if they can't strike a deal, a government-appointed arbitrator will decide the price. It grew out of an investigation where Australia found Google and social media giant Facebook held too much market power in its media, a situation it said posed a potential threat to a well-functioning democracy. Google's local managing director, Mel Silver, called the code overly broad. She says the company faces what it calls, quote, the unmanageable financial and operational risk under the code, and that this is grounds for shutting down search in Australia.
In its current form, the code remains unworkable, and if it became law, would hurt not just Google but small publishers, small businesses and the millions of Australians that use our services every day.
The US government also piled pressure on Australia on Tuesday to scrap the proposed laws. And on Friday, Prime Minister Scott Morrison hit back.
Australia makes our rules for things you can do in Australia. That's done in our parliament, it's done by our government, and that's how things work here in Australia. And people who want to work with that in Australia, you're very welcome. But we don't respond to threats.
This fight is being closely watched around the world, being the biggest challenge so far to the way US tech giants use news on some of the world's biggest websites.
A shortage of oxygen tanks in Mexico City, combined with skyrocketing prices for the life-saving gas, are compounding the coronavirus crisis in the city. In the metro area, home to some 22 million people, more than 20 medical oxygen distributors consulted by Reuters this week had no tanks in stock. Lines stretch for hours at the few stores with available inventory.
I have been here about 8 hours. I have been standing here since 10 a.m. waiting for my tank to be refilled. The oxygen is running low.
For my sister, the test says she has coronavirus. She tested positive 3 days ago and is getting worse. We've been here since 4 o'clock in the morning.
If buyers do get lucky, the price to refill a 24-hour tank is around $160, more than 20 times the country's minimum daily wage of about $7, and a four-fold rise since the end of last year as demand outstrips supply. Mexico City is the epicenter of a second wave of contagion in the country, with nearly 90% of the capital's COVID-19 hospital beds full, according to government data. Deaths are expected to reach 150,000 in the coming days, behind only the U.S., Brazil, and India. Several distributors said that refillable tanks containing 72 hours of oxygen should arrive by the end of the month, but they will cost $990 each to buy. But Ricardo Sheffield, the head of National Consumer Protection Agency Profeco, said last week that oxygen tanks were available and that prices should be stable.
The first thing we must say is that there is a sufficient supply of oxygen. There is not and cannot be a shortage of oxygen. Two companies maintain the same prices, from Tijuana to Merida. So we can say with all certainty that there is not and will not be a shortage of oxygen.
In parts of the country, however, the sheer desperation to find oxygen tanks has taken reckless turns. An armed man in the northwest border state of Sonora stormed a public hospital earlier this week, leaving with 7 portable tanks. No one was hurt, and local security officials later noted that most of the tanks stolen by the man were empty.
they were sort of saying to us, well, do you want to get married in the hospital? This might be your only chance.
Words no young couple should ever have to hear. But for Elizabeth Kerr and her fiancé Simon O'Brien, it was a stark reality of their situation. Both contracted COVID-19 in early January, and days after their positive tests, their oxygen levels dropped dangerously low. They were rushed to Milton Keynes University Hospital in the same ambulance, then placed on separate wards full of COVID patients. Elizabeth told the medics treating her that she planned to tie the knot in June, but that was looking more unlikely after Simon's health further deteriorated.
The respiratory nurses came to see me on the other ward and told me that Simon was going into intensive care. They couldn't delay it, and because we talked to them about, that we're getting married, and we were, and
Hospital staff scrambled to make things possible for the young couple. They secured a licence, and nurse Hannah Gannon acted as a witness, as well as documenting the event for their friends and family. Moments after saying "I do," Simon was sedated and spent the night on mechanical ventilation. With mortality rates now as high as 80% in Britain's ICUs, a happily ever after was far from certain. But their love story provided some respite for exhausted medical staff.
There have certainly been moments where you've questioned, do we stay within nursing? Is this the correct thing to do? But then you experience something like the wedding and you think, absolutely.
Simon is now out of ICU and has been reunited with Elizabeth on a COVID ward. Both are still receiving oxygen, but things are looking up. Elizabeth says the terrifying experience of fighting for every breath has made them realise what really matters: spending time with the people you love.
Elon Musk is offering a $100 million prize for the best technology to scrub carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. The Tesla founder announced the move on Twitter, saying full details would come next week. Capturing planet-warming carbon emissions is becoming a critical part of plans to keep climate change in check. But little progress has been made on the technology so far, with efforts focused on cutting emissions instead. There's no shortage of ideas on how to capture and store carbon, though. In Iceland, they've tried taking CO2 out of the air and turning it into rock stored far below the ground. Swiss scientists have tried storing captured carbon in layers of impermeable clay deep under a mountain. In 2019, US startup Hypergiant Industries said it had designed a bioreactor that uses algae to capture and process carbon dioxide. Over in Norway, they've also tried algae. A startup there has captured CO2 to grow the green gloop and turn it into feed for fish farms. Next week, firms and scientists like this will get a chance to decide if they want to take a shot at Musk's millions.
A duo of tech snags sank the Dow and the S&P 500 Friday, but the Nasdaq hit a record closing high. The Dow fell 179 points, the S&P 500 shed 11, but the Nasdaq eked out a 12-point rally, capping the strongest week for the index in more than 2 months. But that gain for the Nasdaq masked big drops for two struggling tech names. IBM was a big loser after it missed sales estimates and posted the fourth consecutive drop in quarterly sales. The stock slumped 10%. Intel was the other drag. The chip giant's incoming CEO seemed to back away from the company's previous discussion to start outsourcing the production of some of its chips. The uncertainty overshadowed better than expected quarterly results. Intel tumbled 9%. For some on Wall Street, the heavy selling seen in those two tech names added to belief that this market is due for a pullback. Peter Cardillo, chief market economist at Spartan Capital Securities, is in that camp.
It's just a matter of time before we see a pullback of maybe 8%. This market is really stretched out, and so far the news has been good. In fact, the macro news has been improving. The earnings got off to a good season, and of course we'll be hearing more about earnings next week. There are over 700 companies reporting.
Some key names to report results in the coming week include tech bellwethers, Apple, Facebook, and Microsoft. Economic releases on Friday were mostly upbeat. U.S. factory activity surged in January to its highest level in nearly 14 years, according to a private survey. And home resales ended last year with a bang. Full-year sales grew 22% from the year before, fueled by record low mortgage rates and an exodus from urban centers.
Ford announced on Thursday it was recalling 3 million cars due to potential issues with airbag inflators. The measure is expected to cost the automaker $610 million and affects vehicles from the 2006 through 2012 model years. The airbag inflators in question were produced by auto parts supplier Takata. In rare instances, a defect in them can lead to a rupture in the bag, sending potentially deadly metal fragments flying. Worldwide, there have been 27 deaths and at least 400 injuries from the inflators. It's prompted the largest automotive recall in US history of more than 67 million inflators and a further 33 million worldwide. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration rejected on Tuesday a 2017 petition by Ford and Mazda, which sought to avoid recalling the cars with the potentially dangerous airbags. The regulator said the evidence was clear that these inflators pose a significant safety risk. Mazda will be required to recall and repair driver airbags in approximately 5,800 vehicles.
These were the top headlines for today. Stay safe and goodbye.